Hey, it's JK. You know, I realized after doing the Dark Souls 3 torch run that it had been quite a while since we'd done Dark Souls 3 before then, so what better way to rectify that than following it up with one of the hardest Dark Souls 3 challenges I've ever done. So this will work pretty similar to the Dark Souls 1 variant we did earlier this year. We'll play through to the end of New Game++, and each cycle we can only upgrade one stat. In the NG cycle, we will level up only Strength, in the NG Plus cycle, we will level up only Dex, and in the NG++ cycle, we will level up only Luck. We must also use a different weapon for each boss, no repeating weapons. For the Strength and Dex cycles, we must use weapons that have the highest scaling in that respective stat, and for the Luck cycle, anything goes. Just to mention, I won't be attacking with any shields, fist weapons, or whips for, reasons. If you're thinking that the Dex cycle might benefit from me having a high strength stat, given some weapons scale with both, you're correct, they may get a small benefit, but then again, I'm also doing New Game Plus and beyond with unupgraded health and stamina, so I think it balances out. I also won't be allowing any infusions as that muddies the waters in terms of scaling, apart from one situation which we'll get into later. Statistically speaking, there will be deaths. A lot of deaths actually, so let's dive right into Dark Souls 3, but I can only level one stat per cycle. Because my sideburn covered beauty of a character was pretty confused as to why he was being forced to do this run, I named him Derplexed. If there was a movie made about this guy, which actor would you have play him? Let me know in the comments below. We start as the Deprived class and pick the Sovereignless Soul for more levels right off the bat. And speaking of bats, here's our first weapon for the Strength cycle, the Club. Premium bonking and a C scaling in strength. Perfect. We make sure to grab the Titanite shard on the way and then head to the first boss of the run, U-Strength Gundyr. I used the Warcry weapon art to boost our damage before pulling the sword out from Gundyr's chest. The Warcry does also turn our heavy charged attack into a multi-hit attack, but I found that this usually ended with me getting punished. Actually, the normal charged heavy proved much more effective here. A few of these and a stagger or two helps to put a swift end to our first encounter. Seems Gundyr was in the club getting tipsy. Making it to Firelink, we place the coiled sword and then use the souls we got from Gundyr and our starting gift to get up to 17 strength. I had a look at the Shrine Handmaiden's wares, but really nothing caught my eye honestly. We head yonder to High Wall of Lothric, and our first task is to get some more weapons, or should I say, claymore weapons? Seems the Wyvern felt I deserved to be fired for that joke. In any case, we get the second bonfire lit and grab the shard nearby. Luckily, there is another weapon we can grab which I know will fit our needs, the ever useful early game weapon, the broadsword. The Astora Straightsword is also nearby, but this weapon needs 12 faith, which of course we do not have. We continue the collectathon by grabbing the Estus shard and cell key nearby, and free our buddy Grey Hamster. Now to take the shortcut back to the bonfire. I kinda felt some more upgrades might be handy, so we quickly kill Logan Paul for another Titanite shard. But enough messing about, time to make some moves, which of course means we've got to face Vort. Now, I do want to make an effort to test out the charged heavy and weapon arts of some of these weapons, although I may not always use them if they're either repeats or just not viable. The weapon art of the broadsword is the stance, which you can follow up with different attacks depending on whether you press R1 or R2. To be honest, the damage from either of them felt kinda underwhelming. It's only a little bit more than a normal R1, which obviously doesn't cost any FP. So I actually broadly stuck with the charged heavies here because it did by far the most damage, and being under Vort made it easy enough to land them. A few of these, and a final couple of R1s sends him from the Boreal Valley to Death Valley. We pump strength up to 21 and grab the banner from Emma, letting us get to the Undead Settlement. Here, we get Loretta's bone, which we can give to Grey Mouse to open up his shop. He has a few weapons of note, but for now we're just going to buy the mace, which will likely excite some of my stream watchers. It's a classic strength weapon, starting off with a nice C scaling, and works great for smacking dogs. This brings a new meaning to the term shaking like a dog, eh? We speed through the Road of Sacrifices and Crucifixion Woods. We actually really need to get a source of infinite Titanite shards ASAP. Ah nice, more weapons. We grab the Great Club from that guy, and the other gives the Exile Greatsword. The Great Club is a definite for this cycle, but the Greatsword unfortunately has a dex requirement, so won't be something we can use just yet. In Faren Swamp, as well as doing the usual stuff here, we also grab the classic Greatsword. You know, the one that references that famous anime series beginning with B? Boruto! We activate the other bonfire, and finally grab the Dream Ashes Chasers, letting us buy the Titanite shards from the Shrine Handmaiden. With some more shards purchased, we upgrade the mace to +2. Before we proceed, I want to get even more weapons. We activate this bonfire, and I then went about farming the evangelist for the spiked mace. This actually took a lot of farming, and after getting about 10 pairs of evangelist gloves, they finally drop what we need. But guess what? It also has a dex requirement which I didn't know about, so yeah. But hey, at least I don't have to farm for it later. Let's go do a boss anyway. It's mace time, baby. I also brought a charcoal pine bundle to give me some extra fire damage. I always like to start by popping his hand ball for some easy damage. It wasn't needed, but I also smashed the ball on his shin, hopefully making the final part of this fight shorter. So now, finally time to smash his balls in, leaving him under half health as we descend below. The mace did decent damage against the hand, but was somehow just long enough to smash his back balls as well after 4 hits. A few more swings and we break his emaciated fingers, allowing us to embark on the next stage of this run. The most important reward for this victory is the transposing kiln, letting us get boss weapons which we'll be using a lot of this run. For now, we just grab Vort's Great Hammer. This big frosty smashy weapon will come in handy later. Anyway, we get up to 26 strength and we upgrade the Great Club to +3. The Great Club is still, well, great. This giant crystal lizard gets crushed, and we also smash up the NPC enemy here for the Butcher Knife. So glad this weapon made a return. There's also the Brigand Daggers here, which I guess I'll grab as well. I remembered at this point about the Estus Shard and Silver Serpent Ring back at Firelink, so now we're all set. So, which boss to try the Great Club on? Well, the Crystal Sage is here. I'm sure this is going to be really fun with base health. Right? Honestly, this fight really grates on me. Yep, can't wait to do this one on the higher cycles. Anyway, so here's the strat. First, Warcry before entering. I land a normal R1 followed by a charged Warcry R2 to land multiple hits. We Warcry again and land another charged heavy. At this point, phase 2 is going to start, so we pop an Ember. Next, we smash the clones with running attacks and pray we don't get killed, which did nearly happen. A charged heavy and an R1 almost finishes it. He survives with a tiny bit of health. Thankfully, I was able to get in close and land a final hit. We can finally have safe passage to the cathedral. We're now up to 32 strength, which is looking good. Just past the sage, we grab Aladdin's ashes. Sadly, they don't let us buy a magic carpet, but we can get hold of Lloyd's shield ring, giving us reduced damage when we're at full health, a crucial ring for any run where you've got low health in this game. I also brought the life ring, even though the health increase is kinda minimal, but hey, it might come in handy. Near the cathedral, we grab the Executioner's greatsword and then head inside, taking out these crazy sword women on the way. To pair with the shield ring, it seems also Lloyd left his sword ring here as well, boosting our attack at full health. I get all the necessary shortcuts unlocked, but before taking on the Deacons, I helped Sigurd take out this crusty demon and grab the large club, Flynn's ring, and the Chloranthy ring. So now, we ready. It might seem odd that I'd use one of my favourite weapons to take out the Deek heads, but honestly I didn't have anything else better at this point, and it has a really nice horizontal swing that's perfect for this. The Butcher Knife at +3 does good damage and restores health with each hit, only taking a maximum of 3 hits to take out the Deacons. When the head honcho spawns, I took out the blue robes very quickly so they couldn't heal him, and then pretty much R1 spammed up close until we send these cleric clowns straight to the afterknife. We get up to 35 strength, but we save some souls so we can get the Boruto Greatsword up to +3. We're still not very far on into this game, so back in the swamp we put out the third fire, and then go to take on the Stray Demon up here. A crazy thing happened here that I had no idea about until this run. I smashed him in the legs a couple times, and his legs actually shattered, leaving him unable to move much as I easily finished him off. 500 hours in this game, and I've never seen that. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen that before. It definitely made the fight much less frustrating. We get his soul of course, but the real prize I wanted here was the Great Axe. Lastly, I take out the giant lizard here for 2 more Titanite scales. That's enough crystalling for now. First Lord of Cinder, the Abyss Watchers. How will they fare against the power of Boruto? Well, on the positive side, our damage is very good, but we see the first sign of one of the big problems with the strength cycle. Every swing of these huge weapons drains a lot of our rather meager stamina bar. The weapon art there drained the entire stamina bar, and then, on instinct, I went for another attack only to find myself with no stamina to dodge, leaving us open to a swift death. Now, you might be asking yourself, if I'm going to medium roll anyway, why not wear some armor? Why are you naked? To be honest, watching this back, I have absolutely no idea. That death was karma, I suppose. For the first phase, I wait for the second one to spawn and use the distraction as an opportunity to finish him off. For phase 2, I use a very simple strategy of waiting for the jump attack, which you can easily get behind him on, and land a backstab, followed up by a charged heavy, which took him below half health. Unfortunately, I whiffed the backstab on the next opening, and even though I did get some hits in, I was punished with near death. Surviving barely, I managed to land another R1 and then a final backstab. It took real guts to pull that one off. He was going a bit berserk at the end there. With that, we get up to 40 strength already. From the Star Handmaiden, I buy the Morning Shrine and use the Abyss Watcher's Soul to get the Faren Greatsword for the deck cycle later. With more shards bought, we upgrade the Morning Star to +2 and the Large Club to +3, as well as the Vort's Hammer to +2 with the scales we've been collecting. We catacomb this next area for items, including an undead bone shard before descending into the terrifying darkness of the next boss encounter. I chose the Large Club to face Wolnir because, I mean, it's not that exciting a weapon, it's just a worse Great Club really. But I guess a Large Club for a large skeleton? He actually did summon the skeletons and get his sword out. I was sort of worried I might actually die here, but thankfully we club-rocated him up good and he slid back down into the darkness nice and easy. We use his soul to get his sword, but we won't be using that one for quite a while. We gaze into the beautiful blue sky of Irithyll, take out the best doggo on the bridge, grab another bone shard, and of course some human excrement from the sewers. Yum. I decided to test out Vort's Hammer on the Silver Knights, and yeah, that is some good damage. Just above though, you know what it is, Smo's Hammer, the big daddy classic of strength weapons. Gotta save that for something good. The Londor Pale Shade actually did cause some issues for me. Seriously, why does this guy wearing cloth clothes take less damage per swing than knights wearing actual armor? What sense does that make? Seems shady if you ask me. Regardless, a few more bonks send him off to the Shadow Realm. Next, I heroically ran for my life to unlock the shortcut gate. What a brave guy. I didn't even mean to do this, but I smashed the Pontiff Knight and he dropped his curved sword. That's apparently a 4% drop rate, and I haven't even leveled luck yet. Pontiff is up next. He guards the ashes that led us by infinite large Titanite shards. Let's try Vort's Great Hammer against him. Hey, that's some good damage. Okay, that could have gone better. I'm not sure this weapon is the one for him. Let's try a different route first and head to Smoldering Lake. On the way, we bonk down this demon thanks to a little skeleton aid. Now you might wonder, why would we want to come here? Well, there's a lot of large Titanite shards lying around. Not just that, but also some crystal lizards which can drop chunks. There's also another bone shard held by this worm. We've now got 12 large Titanite shards just from a bit of exploring, but wait, there's more. In this chest right here, 3 more to be exact. There's also another Titanite scale, and also this guy who drops the Fume Knight sword. I used to think this fight was so rigged because of how hard this guy was, but here I just bonked him into oblivion. I also finally realized that, if I was medium rolling anyway, buying some strong armor might be good, so went and bought the Black Iron armor. I decided to try the Great Axe for Pontiff this time and upgraded it to +6. With this in hand, and a combination of Black Iron armor and Drang leggings, my body was ready. With some gold pine resin and Warcry, we did some pretty decent damage to Pontiff. The armor did seem to help us survive some hits as well. When the clone phase started, I was actually able to kill it in just 2 hits after reapplying the pine resin. But then, something pretty wild happened. You see, the R1 of the axe makes me bend over, and on 2 occasions I actually completely avoided any damage because his swings went right over me. I was in disbelief. With 1 hit remaining, he tried to summon again, and we ended it. I was skeptical about this axe initially, but in the end, I was grateful I chose to use it. I grabbed the Profaned Greatsword with Pontiff's Soul, and hey, we hit 50 strength. Nice. Now, there was a pretty useful ring I wanted to get, and unfortunately it wouldn't come without some strife. Yep, it's duo doggo time. Now thankfully I was able to kill one without the other noticing me. I don't usually get that lucky, to be honest. We managed to take the second down after a number of hits to get the Ring of Favour. As I mentioned earlier, we can now get the Easterner's Ashes for the infinite large Titanite shards and unlock the way to Anor Londo. Keeping up with the Titanite cost of using a new weapon each boss and leveling up is becoming a little taxing. There's still more scales I can get though, so I grab another from this crystal lizard and one from up on this building above the reservoir. But now, I made a bit of a screw up. So I plan to use the Profaned Greatsword on Aldrich. I upgraded it to +2 for this and, Yeah, it now has equal strength and dex scaling, meaning it's off the table for this cycle. I see why it's profaned. I feel like hurling some profanities myself right now. Well, Morningstar it is. I get it up to +6 in preparation. So damage is not great, even with gold pine resin. Aldrich can be bled, but he is highly resistant. Honestly, there was probably a better choice of weapon for this. He's also, at least in my book, one of the most annoying bosses to do with low health, because of that damn arrow attack. Sure, you can hide in the alcove here, but staying here and avoiding all his other attacks is pretty annoying. If you can hit the upper part of his body, you do get more damage, although that's not always possible, of course. It was hardly a star performance by this weapon, but it didn't leave me too much in mourning. After a lot of patience and a lot of running from arrows, this fight is done. I'm already dreading this on the later cycles. This is really going to suck, isn't it? Now, at this point, I decided I wanted to get all the upgrade materials available for purchase from the Handmaiden, and for that, I would need a very strong weapon. So, time to crack out the Fume Ultra Greatsword, which we get up to +2. That's right, it's Dancer time. Even at just +2, the damage is great, but we of course are mid-rolling and the timing of that against her attacks does throw me off a bit. I was pretty fuming at that death, not gonna lie. Not as fuming as I was about this one though, I really thought I'd killed her there. My favourite thing to do with the sword is the charged R2 for the big smash poke. Good damage and great range, so it hits even if I'm not right up close. For phase 2, I didn't feel as confident to do this as she could respond too quickly with 2-hit combos that mean instant death. The only time I did one was after the double dark AoE she does sometimes, but for the rest, running R1s worked great. I did do another charge after her jump attack even though I paid for it, but luckily a running heavy ended this one, fumigating this room of Dancer's presence. With a good chunk of souls, we now reach 55 strength and proceed into Lothric Castle, where there's Titanite chunks aplenty, as well as some cheap deaths. But also there's Titanite scales here, including 3 from this crawling mimic. Is this the only mimic of this type in the game? I don't recall seeing any other crawling ones around. With the shortcut unlocked and some better armor equipped, it was time to hopefully put Vort's Great Hammer to use. Dragon Slayer armor is weak to both strike and frost, so this hammer is a good choice for him, sometimes proccing frost in a single hit. Unfortunately, he can proc death on me with a single hit also, so that's not great. Same with the post-pooper pest projectiles. Also, what was this hitbox here? I guess a shockwave, but still seems a bit fishy to me. So if that footage didn't hammer it home enough, I can't afford to make a mistake here. I popped an ember early to help me survive a little. Now, in hindsight, could I have taken an alternate route to get more Titanite scales first? Perhaps, but I wanted his weapon to help me make that route a little bit easier, so this seemed logical. Plus, compared to a lot of other late game bosses, most of his attacks are fairly predictable. The 3-hit combo is by far the best for an easy punish. There was one point at the end where I have no idea how I survived. I got hit from behind by a butterfly projectile, then while dodging his onslaught, I rolled into a laser beam I didn't see, but somehow got through and healed. After that, one more frost proccing hit, and another normal hit thankfully ended this one. So now, we can get his weapon, the Dragon Slayer Great Axe. Lightning damage should be quite handy here. We also pumped strength to 60, which will be about where we leave it so we can focus on buying upgrade materials. Speaking of upgrades, we get the axe up to +2, grab the Knight's Ring from this room here, and then get ourselves 3 more Titanite scales from this chest. We made our way into the Consumed King's Garden, a pretty frustrating area overall. But hey, at least the knights are gracious enough to drop it down for us. Ouch, that looks very painful. So Osiris the Cuttlefish King is up next. I was predicting this fight to be unpleasant because of how wild he goes in phase 2, but surprisingly, this was one of the easier fights so far. Our damage was great, which of course helped, and staying underneath him meant that he mainly did quite easy to avoid attacks. I actually only had to deal with the charge once, and we survived it thankfully. Towards the end, I did some jumping heavies for extra damage and finished off this dragon in short order. I quickly went to unlock the Irithyll dungeon bonfire, easily smashing Dark Souls 2 on the way by walking around him and bonking him with my hammer. I then returned to the room beyond Osiris, where I made a pan snake, got the Path of the Dragon emote, and grabbed some more Titanite scales lying around in the chests. Now, I don't intend to use Smo's hammer for the boss of Irithyll dungeon, but I just really wanted to smack these stupid jailers. The dungeon also has some other goodies worth our time, like another Estus shard and the pickaxe. Thankfully, we don't need to make a pig eat some mushrooms to get it this time. We get this rodent to make an irrational decision to jump down this hole, and then partake in some light meditation to enter Archdragon Peak. So for once, we can actually plunge Ancient Wyvern given we're doing melee here. I didn't really want to waste a good weapon for this, so I just used the unupgraded war pick. The worst part is having to run through this gauntlet of enemies to get there. Stopping to kill them feels like a surefire way to get fried, but not killing them means that BS like this happens. His axe on a chain hit me through the floor. What the Izolith is this? Anyhow, next attempt we make it past, pick our spot, and wage war on this Wyvern's grey matter for the easy one-shot. No wasted motion here. In his arena, we can also grab the Ring of Steel protection. Crazy how late in the game you get this. Well, time to get our first +9 weapon. The pickaxe. No, I'm not joking. It's actually kinda decent, the fastest of the great hammers even if the damage is lower. We easily stunlock this knight and claim the Drakeblood Greatsword for use much later. This area is full of upgrade materials like Twinkling and Scales, but the main prize is a little further ahead, just beyond the third bonfire of the area. We at last grab the Dragon Chaser's ashes, narrowly surviving the escape. These ashes unlock chunks, twinklies and scales in the Handshot Maiden Shrine. Having the full stock here will be very useful. I didn't quite fancy the Nameless King just yet, so opted to make my way to the Profaned capital, once again finding another Dark Souls 2 reference like a constant looming reminder of the contest. But what weapon to use for Yhorm? Well, for some reason, I decided on the Reinforced Club. I don't really know why. Yhorm can't be bled, so that makes the club's bleed kinda useless, but whatever. I bought some Titanite chunks to turn it into the Reinforced Club, and then returned to the capital to get more weapons. First the Eleonora from this Monstrosity of Sin, and then I farmed the Gargoyle Flame Hammer from this gargoyle near the bonfire. I had some more souls thanks to the farming, so we get the club up to +8, and now it's finally time for Yhorm. Thanks to the recent torch run, I felt pretty confident about my strategy. Stay in between his legs, bait the two-hand slam, walk out of the way, walk back in and hit the hands. Repeat until you stagger him and land the critical. The club did a lot more damage than the torch unsurprisingly, so it reinforced my decision to use it even if the bleed was totally wasted. When he trans-Yhorms into his second phase, things don't really change much honestly. He can do the shockwave when you're underneath him sometimes, but the follow-up is easy to dodge. After about 7 minutes, this fight is over. Actually way more fun than just using the Storm Ruler. With his soul, we of course can grab an absolute beast of a strength weapon, Yhorm's Great Machete. We'll save that for later, but for now, I've got some questions I'd like to axe the old Demon King. I'd really like to pick his brain, you know. Damage from the pickaxe was really good. Honestly, this fight should have ended in about 90 seconds, but I somehow kept missing the opportunity to attack near the end. Probably got too cocky. But anyway, I finally got it, and this time made sure to get well away from him as he exploded before running back in for one final hit to end this one. If you're wondering why I upgraded the pickaxe to +9 just for old Demon King, I don't know man, I was really sleep deprived when I did this run. I used his soul to get the old King's Great Hammer, which to be honest, we didn't end up using this cycle, but don't worry, it will have its time. For now though, I was planning to take on Champion Gundyr next. I wanted something a bit faster, so I went with the Eleonora axe we got earlier. So the good news is that it has the same quirk that the Great Axe has against Pontiff Sullivan, meaning we can duck under some swings. Doesn't work very well with uppercuts though. The weapon art gives us a short-lasting buff that gives the blade the bleeding effect and restores our health on each hit. I found this to be a bit too short-lasting to be useful to be honest. I never managed to actually hit Gundyr enough times while it was active to proc bleed. So I decided to ignore the weapon art altogether and just did it the old-fashioned way, dodging and weaving between his attacks, occasionally trading hits. The axe did okay damage, and after a near choke at the end from his smack and shoulder tackle, I landed the finishing blow. In Dark Firelink Shrine, I purchased the Priestess Ring. I debated whether to allow the stat boosting rings for this run, but I figured that it does unlock a couple of more unique weapon options, so it was fine to use it to keep things interesting. We can also use Gundyr's Soul to get an excellent boss weapon, Gundyr's Halberd. We'll save that for a rainy day, and in the meantime upgrade the Gargoyle's Flame Hammer. This led to a bonk off with Havel, which, let's just say he won. After taking out my aggression on this innocent rock lizard, I decided to try out a new and much cheaper tactic, getting Havel to fall off the ladder. After a bit of fiddling, he finally fell, leaving him one hit from death. One further strike turns Havel to gravel and rewards me with his weapon. So now at last we can take on the Nameless King. But what to use? Well, I had originally thought about the Gargoyle's Flame Hammer, but I wasn't really feeling it for this fight. So, alternate plan. Onto the Grand Archives. The main reason is there's a lot of Titanite scales here. I know I can buy them now, but 20k each is pretty expensive. There's also a hidden titanite slab you get access to after pulling this lever, and the scholar's ring behind this bookcase. The 3 NPC guys did cause me some issues, especially when they troll you hiding behind the lift like this. But eventually, I took them out and claimed some more new weapons for myself. I also grabbed the Avalyn to trade for scales and the Hunter's Ring from the top of the building. The reason I wanted the Hunter's Ring is because I want to use Gundyr's halberd. It's clearly a strength weapon with its B scaling in strength, but it requires 15 dex to wield, so this ring is needed. With the scales we've gained, we get the halberd all the way to +4. By being naked, we could actually light roll with the halberd, which I was very happy about. Except when I choked and messed up the dodge, of course. For phase 1, I went in unembered and hit this tall bird with our halberd. Quite easy to do thanks to the overhead strike this weapon has. The weapon art of the halberd does a forward charge, but honestly I just didn't fancy taking the risk as it leaves you pretty open. For the Nameless King fight, I was pretty worried about getting one shot given our lack of armor, so I did the only sensible thing. I beat the fight hitless. To be honest, I wasn't even intending to do this, but with his damage we were really outgunned here, so I was pretty cautious, waiting only for the attacks I knew I could safely punish, namely the flying stab attacks. The charge up lightning strike is also a good one if you roll through it towards him. With a few more swings, this Lord of Gwyndr is defeated. I'm pretty proud of that one. Keeping our weapon stock building, why do I have handprints on my behind? What the hell did Nameless King do to me there? Anyway, we grab the Dragon Slayer spear from below and convert his soul into a weapon. His spear sadly has too high a faith requirement to ever use, so we'll settle for the Storm Curve Sword. We also use some chunks to upgrade our Gargoyle Flame Hammer to +9. Let's see how this weapon fares against the Twin Princes, another boss that tends to be a bit tricky in challenge runs. Honestly, this didn't start too well, but our damage is pretty good, and the Flame Hammer swings faster than you might expect, and actually did manage to stagger Lorien. The wide swings of the weapon also work great for the second phase, able to often hit Lothric as well as Lorien. Thanks to the combination of these swings and the high damage, this ended up being pretty easy, and I actually got through the Twin Princes on my first attempt. They goggle on my flames as we hammer home our victory. We of course grab Lorien's greatsword with the Prince's soul, and then upgrade Smo's hammer to +4. That's right, it's finally time to use this beast. We fill up all the thrones with the Lord's ashes and prepare for the final base game boss. So, it would appear Smo's hammer is similar to Dark Souls 1. The damage is huge, but it obscures so much of the damn screen that at points I can't even see Soul of Cinder. Also, we're of course forced to mid-roll again, but I'm kinda used to that by now. Mostly. 3 swings from the hammer is enough to get the stagger, pretty handy especially in phase 1. We blast his health down quite quickly, Smo vertly swinging wildly at points. For phase 2, the opportunities to attack are fewer as he can respond quite quickly, and the last thing I want is to get caught by the multi-hit attack. I stick to 1 hit each time here because it's too risky otherwise. I actually managed to miss once, which is pretty wild given the size of this thing, but with enough patience, one final swing is game Smover for this boss. Of course we still have the DLC to do. I decided to actually tackle the Ring City DLC first. There's good logic behind this to be fair, so stay with me. First, we send this angel back to heaven to make movement a little easier so that we can grab the Ring of Steel Protection +3, the first of several +3 ring variants in this DLC, which will be highly useful for the run. I then flawlessly nail the swamp skip jump. I of course mean I purposely did that because I need some stuff from the swamp. With the angel over there dead, I grab the Ring of Favor +3. We then smash this pyromancer with Yorm's machete. It was kinda Zoverkill to be honest, but I enjoyed it. Now, with some heavier armor and Yorm's machete, I was almost ready for the Demon Prince. I actually opted to get this up to +5 for this one, as I predicted it would be one of the tougher bosses of this cycle. Our damage against these demons is some of the best I've ever seen against them. The biggest problem though? Getting one shot. Serves me right for trying to save my Ember until phase 2. Doing over 500 damage with a hit to this guy is really good, but unfortunately his relentless fireball Yormations got the best of me on a really close attempt. The other issue that compounds the potential one-shots is the stamina situation. One swing takes off over half my stamina, but the good news is that staying below these demons reduces that pain, and with enough hits we can even open them up for a crit, doing monster damage. For Demon Prince, this still works to a degree, but he has many attacks designed to catch you, like the fireball, the slam, or jumping back for the laser. Providing you're close enough, you can just about manage to run behind him as he starts the laser for some free hits, but it's pretty close when you're mid-weight. With enough charged hits though, we poise break him for a critical, and a couple further hits after put an end to this one. It was tough, but that was a mere masher teaser of what's to come. Before proceeding further into the Ring City DLC, there's something I want from the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. Climbing this tower, we can get one of the best weapons in the game for SL1 runs, the Millwood Battle Axe. With this upgraded to +8, we're ready. We get imposingly lifted down to the Ring City, and honestly, at this point I was ready to be done with this cycle, so I pretty much just speed ran through. Midir did pose a small couple of problems, but nothing a few axe hits to the face couldn't solve. We grabbed the Chloranthy Ring +3, and then shortly after I realized I never equipped the Steel Protection Ring +3. That probably would have helped with the demons. Oops. I grabbed the +3 variant of Havel's Ring from the swamp, and then take out this Ring City Knight to get the awesome Ring City paired greatswords. But now of course, we have to do my least favourite boss, Half-Light. I had decided on the Millwood Battle Axe for this encounter, but honestly it was a bit too run-of-the-mill wood to pull this one off. This fight was pretty annoying, especially having to listen to this guy talking bollocks every single time. Just shut up, Adjudicator. Go fuck yourself. Half-Light can very easily two-shot me quicker than I can even blink thanks to my low health. After a number of frustrating deaths, I decided a different approach might be needed. So I thought I'd give Lorien's Greatsword a try. There's one feature it has which I think might just get the job done. The Charge Heavy is a big poke just like Fume Knight's sword. This is actually my favourite thing about using Ultra Greatswords in this game. So here's the strat. First I use the weapon art to buff the sword with fire at the start of the fight. Then as the first Ian the Painting God spawns, get behind him and land the backstab. Do a charged heavy as he's getting up, then do another charged heavy almost right away so it hits him when he gets up, killing him outright. Now for Half-Light. Get him in a position where he's walking towards you, but not holding his sword in the sheath, and let off a charged heavy to smack him down. At half health, another Ian spawns in, so just assault him brutally and do not let him heal. Then, again get a charged heavy in as he walks towards you. You can actually follow up with another one as he's getting up, and then another one again. I would have been able to do a fourth, but I ran out of stamina and he broke out of the chain, but luckily, I landed another right after. I wish I had a DeLorean to go back in time and just do this strategy from the start. Moving swiftly on from that, let's do Midir with the paired greatswords we got earlier. Yeah, my ears definitely ringed after that one. So this was my first time since maybe my first ever DLC playthrough where I fought Midir with medium roll. It's definitely a situation where you cannot get greedy. Here it had been ages since I'd attacked and I went for it at a time I definitely shouldn't have. I stuck with the L1 attack here to poke with both greatswords as it covers good distance and Midir is weaker to thrust attacks. The distance covering is especially useful for running around and getting a hit in after Midir's fire attacks. I think the luckiest moment came when I ended up against the wall after one of his attacks, and the hit I landed in the opening actually got the stagger for the critical. A few more after this, and we left Midir physically impaired, and victory was ours. Okay, last boss of the Ring City, 3 left total for this cycle. What to use for Slave Knight Gael? Well, initially I tried with the Dragon Tooth, but to be honest this is not a fight where I want to be mid-rolling if I can help it, given I already only dodged some of these attacks by the skin of my teeth. So, Millwood Battle Axe it is. High speed swings and quick recovery, what more could you axe for in an intense battle such as this one? From Millwood to Thrillwood. Jokes aside, this was fun. I didn't even attempt any charged heavies here because it just wasn't worth it, especially in the latter phases. There were still a couple of close calls, and I wasn't going to be surviving many hits from him, but one-shots were less of a danger here than against the demons or Midir. So, with enough dodging and swinging through, we put a stop to his Gale Force winds, and we're enslaved by this DLC no longer. So, another reason I wanted to do Ring City first is so we could get Gael's greatsword to use. A fun weapon for sure. Well, back to Ariandel we go. I confront my deep-rooted fear of heights, before finally making it to the bottom. Now, we take on the champion's Grave Tender using the Dragon Tooth. We give the dogs a good bonking, this last one proved tricky to actually hit for some reason though. With just the champion at least for now, I actually broke his guard and landed a critical, followed by a heavy attack shortly after. When he summoned the wolf, I actually broke his guard again, got another crit, and then landed another heavy, thankfully killing him before the wolf got fully involved in our business. This weapon may be slow as hell, but at least the range and damage are good. I got pretty lucky here as I managed to break the wolf's poise just before he got to his second phase, landing a critical which nearly killed him outright. As he went back and howled, I landed a charged heavy to finish him off. We fought Dragon Tooth and Nail here, but in the end we got it done. So, one final boss for this cycle. I get Gael's Greatsword up to max upgrade for this one. Let's see how it fares. But first, we gotta do Sir Wilhelm. Thanks to the poke strat we use with Half-Light, he lets out a Wilhelm scream and dies shortly after. On the way through the mountains, we grab the Earthseeker axe which we'll use later and unlock the way to Frida. Truly a worthy final boss for this cycle. The first phase, I focused mainly on getting backstabs when she went invisible and charge pokes whenever she did her jump. Damage was good indeed. For phase 2, as always, we focus on Father Ariandel, except when Frida heals where we give her a good poke. With enough hits, we poise break Ariandel and land a crit to finish off this phase. Now Gael's sword has a really cool weapon art where you jump and spin around, and on one attempt, I tried to use this to finish Frida off in phase 3, but missed and she killed me. A real Gaelia on my part, and one I won't be repeating. Her invisibility is still the best opening, getting a backstab with a charged heavy follow-up is absolutely beautiful damage. I did manage to land the weapon art combo this time, which I was pretty happy with. Best not to try these things out when it's going to be the decider between victory and defeat, I guess. With one last invisibility attack, we land the backstab and the charged heavy to defeat the final boss of the strength cycle, with Frida at last! Right, so we have some things to do before this next cycle. First, we take out this guy for the Uchi Katana. And then I upgrade as many weapons as I could be bothered to do, but no higher than around +6 for normal weapons and +2 for special weapons. We then set ourselves on fire as is customary to cleanse away all that dirty strength main aura, and we find ourselves back in Cemetery of Ash for the dex cycle. It's only going to get tougher from here. By the way, thanks for watching this crazy marathon video. If you make it to the end and you end up enjoying it, maybe consider joining those subscribed to the channel. We'd love to have you, but even if you don't decide to, thanks for watching regardless. So for Gundyr, we'll be using the basic dagger. Even at +6, the damage is pretty weak, but I guess that's to be expected. We can quick step with the dagger to avoid some hits, but mainly we just ask Gundyr if he likes the cut of our jib. I don't think he got the point, but regardless, the first boss of the U Dexterity cycle falls soon after. Pretty tragic, but the souls we got from him aren't even enough to level up once. Thankfully we got some souls to pop so we can get 1 point of dex. Hooray! With my weapon stock sorted, I decided that the +3 spear would be our first weapon of choice, and we jump back into Lothwall of Hyrich. There's no need to delay, so let's get straight into Vort. This weapon was okay, I guess? I mean, it's not the most inspirational, that's for sure. You poke with it, and it pokes at a decent speed without using too much stamina. Well, maybe the damage could be a bit better than that, but it is only +3 in New Game Plus, so what are you gonna do? We stay under Vort for the most part, stabbing him right in his Boreal Valley at points. A few hits later, and down he goes. Back in Firelink, we go up to an absolutely astonishing 12 Dexterity. I decided to try a very different route this time, so... Is it a bad time that I'm struggling to even kill Emma with this weapon? Dancer looks especially pissed this time. So I had this great idea about killing Dancer with the Bandit's Knife. Low damage, short range, quick attacks, bleed potential. I don't know, sounded like fun. But after a few attempts, I actually realized that the Bandit's Knife for some reason has equal scaling in strength and dex, so unfortunately I banned it from this cycle. I probably should actually look at the scaling stats instead of assuming. Victory stolen from me once again. Uchi Katana it is. I actually swapped my setup around to give myself the Hunter's Ring so I could actually wield this, given it needs 16 dex, and I also made sure I could light roll. Weirdly, the damage was not that much better than the Bandit's Knife, but hey, at least the range was better. Phase 1 was pretty chill. Walking behind her and slashing her right in the Gucci with my Uchi worked well. We even managed to proc bleed. Phase 2, however, has far fewer windows to attack. It was mainly running in for one hit here and there apart from if she did the jump, or if she did the dock AoE where there was time for maybe 2 hits. It was a pretty nerve-wracking 7 minutes, knowing that one missed dodge would almost certainly be my end via her double swings, but after another dark AoE from her, I landed a charged heavy to end it. The main benefit here is the huge amount of souls she drops, allowing us to jump all the way up to 23 dex, a much more respectable number. It might have come at the cost of using up one of our good weapons already, but I feel it was worth it, and it does mean Dancer is out of the way. Through the Undead Settlement, we remember this time to grab my wife Bab's favourite weapon, the Great Scythe. We'll save that for later. For now though, we'll take on the Greatwood with our Scimitar. Honestly, this boss sucks. It scimitarnishes the boss quality DS3 is known for. If I'd been really prepared, I would have gotten charcoal pine resin for this, but oh well. Destroying the handball was pretty easy as usual, but getting the shin one was tricky. I realised though that the second hit of the scimitar's charged heavy attack was a higher vertical swing, and using that I was able to destroy it. For the second phase, I focused first on destroying the back balls again as it seemed easier, and then turned my attention to the hand. The scimitar did decent damage and hits fast, so with a decent opening, I could do some nice numbers, and soon after I turned the Greatwood into Deadwood. With the transposing kiln back in our possession, I used the soul of the Greatwood to get Arstor's spear for use later. Using poppable souls, we get up to 26 dex and then head back to the undead settlement. I actually made friends with the giant archer this time before going on to farm the storyteller's staff in the Road of Sacrifices. Why do we want that? I'm not telling yet. The souls we farmed let us get up to 28 dex now, and we then upgrade Arstor's spear to +1. This meant it was in fact Crystal Sage time once again. I had initially wanted to use this spear because it inflicts poison, and I had thought this would help keep the sage's health ticking down. Unfortunately though, I never found the poison was all that helpful due to how slow it was, and also the spear was only +1, which meant the damage wasn't all that great. So partway through I decided to switch to the S-Stock because it was upgraded higher and could attack quickly. This went a lot better, apart from a choke right near the end. I hate this fight. Being New Game Plus, the magic spam in Phase 2 has an even higher chance of ending me in a heartbeat. The worst attack is the Soul Shower type attack, which often seems like luck whether I avoid it or not. Here, taking out the clones is essential, so I can get a full poke combo off on the real Sage. Frustratingly, they were left close to death as they teleported away, meaning another round of projectile bullet hell. I at last managed to get the final jabs in as the Sage tried to S-stockpile more homing soul masses. Even with victory, I got hit at the end, narrowly surviving. What an outrageous load of BS. At least I only have to do this one more time. Dex gets boosted to 29, and I now upgrade the Halberd to +6. I plan to use this for the Deacons for one very specific reason, but we'll cover that later. I can also light roll with this setup, which is always nice. We take out the dogs and light the Cleansing Chapel bonfire, blitz through the graveyard grabbing the Astora Greatsword on the way, and roll like mad to get past the giant. So my ingenious plan for the Deke heads? Well, use the R2 of the Halberd to spin to win through them. But there was one issue. I underestimated how much I'd get interrupted trying to do this. Like, seriously, it got ridiculous. But then I realized something. Maybe light rolling was not the way here. Maybe what I actually needed was poise from heavier armor to allow me to get off the attack uninterrupted. This honestly did help a lot and greatly reduced the how burden doing this attack was placing on my health. By doing the attack even uncharged, I was able to sweep through large hordes of Deacons, taking many out in one go and actually interrupting their attacks for a change. Continuing the assault and thinning the herd, we take down this ridiculous boss shortly after. With the washing pole now equipped and our decks racing to 31, it was time to tackle Faren Keep again. I took the time to take out these idiots on the way, even managing to get the Rotten Grue curved sword from one of them and the Rotten Grue dagger from another. Is it just me, or does Rotten Grue sound like an alternate language title for the Despicable Me movies? We once again snag the Dream Ashes chasers before preparing for the first Lord of Cinder of the deck cycle, the Abyss Watchers. Washing Pole is a pretty awesome weapon all things considered. The range is just beautiful and it offers some decent damage too. Feels great doing this fight with a fast weapon. Backstabs once again work great, especially with a charged heavy follow-up. It's not quite as epic damage as the Greatsword, but we do have the time and stamina to land a further R1 to follow this combo. The Phase 2 Watcher should really retire this jump attack because thanks to abusing the backstab window here, this guy is totally washed and soon after we knock him out of pole position with a few further slashes. Dex now reaches 33 and we head to the Catacombs once again. Despite some knives in the back, we make a daring escape and I send the skeletons some cease and desist letters shortly after. So, time for Wolnir. I decided to use Valor Heart for this one, the sword shield combo the champion's Gravetender uses. I don't know about you guys, but I think this weapon kinda sucks despite looking cool. Yeah, sure it's only at +2, but the damage never seems that great, and the shield can't block all that much. I don't know, maybe it's good for PvP, but I just needed a spot to use this and this seemed as good as any. If you love it, then hey, all good. Hope you didn't take what I said to heart there. Anyway, Wolnir slides back into the darkness once again. We now arrive at Irithyll, boost our Dexterity stat to 30 dex, give this dog the cold shoulder, and this time head to Irithyll Dungeon as our first stop. We throw some cheese down this hole to lure these rats in there, and as we have the Path of the Dragon emote already, we can immediately head to Archdragon Peak. As the Ancient Wyvern again doesn't deserve a good weapon to be wasted on him, I use the Brigand Twin Daggers. The snakes here tried to throw me in the Brigand, of course I resisted, so they just killed me instead. Next time, I made it up and executed a Spider-Man-like dive that would have made Brigandrew Garfield proud. Onwards and upwards. It's probably pretty obvious, but the main reason I wanted to come here first was all the upgrade materials lying around, as well as those Dragon Chaser's ashes to open up the Shrine Handmaiden's shop. While we're here though, we might as well do Nameless King. Seems the forecast is cloudy with strong gwynds. Our weapon of choice here will be Onokiri and Ubadachi, a dual katana type weapon. I decided to upgrade this to +8 for this fight and also adjusted my load for light roll. L1 is the way forward here as it attacks with both katanas. The range isn't as long as the halberd we used last time, so we did miss the Storm King's head a couple times, but overall this wasn't too much trouble. For phase 2, I did initially start using only one L1 for openings, but soon realized I could hit with 2 during some of them. I still needed to ensure I didn't get Ono carried away though, as his damage was very high. It wasn't quite hitless, but only using 2 heals is still fine, and after some beautiful slash combos, Nameless King is done already, very early into this cycle this time. So back to Irithyll, and for Pontiff Sullivan, I decided to go with the Faren Greatsword with the Hornet Ring equipped. Why, you ask? Well, this weapon can actually parry with the little dagger in the left hand. Landing a parry, a crit, and a charged heavy takes off about 40% of his health. Landing another brings him down to about 20%. He goes to summon the clone, and I land a couple more hits before dodging the clone's attack, parrying Pontiff again, and delivering the finishing blow, clearing Pontiff in just over a minute. We're not that far on into the deck cycle yet, but I'd say things are going well. Worth mentioning, I went with a full max attack setup with Flynn's Ring as well, so make sure to do that if you want to try this for yourself for whatever reason, I don't know. Now, these NPCs have some weapons I wanted, but I couldn't really be bothered to fight them, so ladder cheese it is. This nets us the Drang Twin Spears for later use. Of course, we get the Easterner's Ashes again, so now all upgrade materials are available for purchase, and we unlock Anor Londo. But before we tackle the joy that will be Aldrich, I upgrade the Crescent Axe, which has a very useful looking overhand R1, and we return to the Profaned capital. That's right, it's time for Yorm. You know the strat by now, of course, but this weapon made it even easier. Not only can we hit Yorm's arm with no issue, but I realized a little way into the fight that the weapon swing is so high that we could actually hit Yorm's head when he does the slam. This does even more damage per swing and opens him up for criticals more often. This still took ages because the weapon was only +6 and Yorm gets an enormous health boost in NG+, but overall pretty easy, and after 12 minutes, we crescent Yorm to the afterlife. So I kind of feel like we haven't had the best of luck with spears so far, but then I upgraded the Dragon Slayer spear to +3, ready to take on Aldrich, who is apparently weak to lightning and thrust damage, and found that it did a terrible job. Super weak damage overall, which was very disappointing. I'll find another use for this, but yeah, these spears are really dragging their feet here. So what to use instead? Well, I thought I'd give the Pontiff Knight Curve Sword a go. I went with Lloyd's Sword Ring for more damage, and an armor setup that still let me light roll. Damage was actually better from the Curved Sword than the Dragon Slayer Spear, which is pretty confusing, but I'm not going to pontificate how I feel about that now. I did try out the weapon art here, which did some more damage, and also had nice range with this big frost blade. I think you can inflict frost with enough hits, but I didn't ever manage to get this to happen. Aldrich kindly didn't spam his arrows too much this time, and after a few more hits, we defeat another Lord of Cinder to keep ourselves ahead of the curve. So Lothric Castle should be our next destination, but we have a couple things to clear up first. I upgrade the Despicable Me dagger to +6, level up Dex to 38, and then go to take on the old Demon King. Really surprisingly, this guy can in fact be poisoned. Our damage was low, but the poison build-up grew with each successful hit. Of course, this still doesn't do all that much damage, but getting extra chip is always a good thing. The only hairy moment here was getting stuck underneath him as he started charging the ending explosion, but once I got a way to avoid it, he was finished. Now, we move onwards into Lothric Castle. First to the Consumed King's Garden, where we grab the claw weapon on the way. Now the question is, can the Dragon Slayer Spear redeem itself against Osiris? He again is supposedly weak to lightning. Okay, to be fair, while the normal R1s were nothing to write home about, the weapon art did some pretty decent damage, and the charged heavy also was okay. It was enough to get the job done here anyway, and the fact the charged heavy stabs upwards helps to avoid missing Osiris' spindly body when underneath him. I wanted to finish with a weapon art, and after missing literally 3 times, we finally landed it flush to consume this slightly underwhelming weapon from our arsenal. So next up was Champion Gundyr. After upgrading Dex to 42, I debated for a while on what to use and ended up deciding on Aster's Spear. Let's see if we can redeem this one too. To be honest, this took longer than it should have. I had this incredibly frustrating moment on one of the first few attempts where I decided to use the weapon art to finish off Gundyr and somehow missed despite him being right in front of me and of course dying shortly after. It seems I had some stored up frustration as this loss led me to choking several more times, always getting caught by this uppercut attack. So Aster's Spear does have poison which we can just about proc on Gundyr. We can thankfully get 2 hits in during some of his openings as the spear does attack reasonably quickly, which is good. The fight was still pretty intense, but after enough spirited back and forth, Gundyr falls once again. For our next weapon, we go for the Storm Curve Sword, which we get up to +4. I didn't really have a specific reason for using this here, I just wanted to give it a go. On the way up through Lothric, we grabbed some Titanite scales from the Mimic again, as well as from this chest here, before taking on Dragon Slayer armor. The damage from the curved sword was okay, but its fast swing meant we could get multiple hits in during Dragon Slayer armor's openings. I figured out this time how to position myself better during his falling bolt attack, which allowed for multiple hits easily. He also does this sometimes in phase 2, which is handy, so I stuck close to him trying to bait it. I nearly fell when I used a late fight Ember, but luckily was able to weather the storm, and after a few more swings, we disarmor this boss and move onwards. Remember the claw we grabbed from earlier? I've always enjoyed the claw weapons in these games, and this is my first time actually using them in Dark Souls 3. The L1 attack is super satisfying and very fast, helping to quickly proc bleed on enemies. But how would they fare against Lothric and Lorien? Well, really good actually. Because of the speed of our attack, it's quite easy to get behind them, land an L1, and then dodge the follow-up swing and repeat. As long as you don't get caught by this anyway. I mean, the damage isn't huge, but with the frequency of attacks combined with bleed potential and the ease of being able to dodge a lot of their follow-ups, this was one of the smoothest Twin Prince fights I've had in ages. I actually nearly killed Lothric after just one defeat of Lorien, thanks to the sheer number of hits I got in during this period. If you struggle with this boss, I highly recommend you declare Martial Claw on them and try this strategy. It was a piece of cake, or perhaps I should say, a slice of cake. There's still a few more weapons we need to finish off the Dex run, and of course how could we forget the Sellsword Twin Blades, a fan favourite amongst Dex users in this game. We get them leveled up to +8 and get the Firekeeper to open the way to the Soul of Cinder. I had initially thought to do Soul of Cinder now, but just to mix things up, I decided to head into the Ariandel DLC instead first. As always, I demonstrated my Spider-Man-like abilities to descend down these branches. Just call me Peter Parkour. Anyway, let's give the Drang Spears a try against the Champion's Gravetender. Of any of the spears we've used so far, these are by far my favourite. The L1 combo can deal a really nice amount of damage, and keeping the Gravetender from getting close to me was really satisfying, as, let's be real, all my homies hate the Gravetender. The damage against the wolf is even better. I did get jump scared by the wolf somehow being alive with his health bar looking like this, and then barely dodged him as he flew around like a boomerang, but luckily we landed a final hit to defeat our first DLC boss on the Dex cycle. Next we upgrade the Great Scythe to +9. I think you know what the plan is here. Okay, look, I swear I wasn't actually trying to cheese Wilhelm here. Honest, he actually just fell off all by himself. I wasn't even anywhere near him. You gotta believe me. Anyway, we make it to the church, and it's time for Frida once again, but this time it's a Scythe on Scythe showdown. Now, if you've ever used the Great Scythe before in this game, you know that it's honestly a shell of its former self compared to Dark Souls 1 thanks to the lower damage, the sweet spot mechanic, and the weird angle swings of the charged heavy. But that doesn't mean it's unusable. Far from it. Range is still good, and of course for phase 1 all we need is to be able to backstab anyway. Shockingly, in phase 2, it actually did manage to poise break Father Ariandel. The crit animation's iframes actually saved me here as Frida appeared out of his bowl and started attacking me. I could barely even see her. For Black Flame Frida, the long swings of the scythe come in clutch. One thing to mention, why is the scythe backstab still jamming the pole into their back? Surely there's a more logical move than that. I did try the weapon art at one point, which was a decent horizontal swing, so that's something. Anyway, one final backstab and we successfully defend our scythe style choices. I still had another weapon I'd forgotten to get, so back below the Catacombs of Karthus, I tricked this demon into killing this mimic to get the Black Blade. This weapon is the strongest katana, but has the shortest range, although that won't really matter too much. I hope anyway. So we mission through the Dreg Heap, taking out the angels on the way, and prepare for the Demon Prince. My logic for using this weapon was the bleed status it can inflict, as the demons can be bled, which overcomes their really high damage resistances. Although, I found a lot of good that does when you misread an attack and get splatted. Twice. The lower stamina use per swing was definitely nice compared to doing this with Yorm's machete. Honestly, I don't think the bleed actually procced more than once this whole fight, and that was only after a lot of hits on the demon from below. As for the demon prince, I hit this guy a huge amount of times, but never got a single bleed the whole fight, so yeah, I guess that was kind of pointless. Maybe Doris's gnawing gave me too high expectations? In any case, our damage was a little lacking, but with enough hits and patience, the demon prince falls. So remember earlier I mentioned there was one time in the whole run I would use an infusion? Well, that time is now. The Historic Greatsword is considered a dex weapon despite having C in both scalings, and I really wanted to use it here. When you give it a sharp infusion, it gets S scaling in dex, while a heavy infusion only gives it an A scaling in strength, so to me, this counts for the dex cycle. But this is the one and only time. You'll see why I was so keen to use this shortly. Anyway, we ride down with the imps, light the bonfire, and smack Midir right in his Dark Eater. So yeah, Half-Light. This is what I wanted this weapon for. Being that it's an ultra greatsword, it has the same moveset as Lorien's greatsword, meaning we get that lovely heavy charged poke, my beloved. For the first time ever, I actually first tried Half-Light in a challenge run. The strategy was very similar to the last cycle, and honestly, I felt really good about doing this given my storied hatred for this boss. 10 out of 10, would poke again. Back at Firelink, I upgrade the Black Knight Glaive and the Hollow Slayer Greatsword. Black Knight Glaive will be our weapon of choice for Midir. I sure hope he doesn't one-shot me with a lot of his attacks now. Ow. Ow. This one especially hurt. I got fried like I was in a micro-glaive there. Now for some reason I had the bright idea of equipping the Hornet Ring, thinking it would boost my crit damage to Midir, but trust me, it did not. You just end up with him surviving and then panicking and dying. Well, you do if you're me anyway. For the winning attempt, I decided that it was best to just go all in with damage as most of his attacks one-shot me anyhow. My favourite attack windows are after he does a grab attack attempt or the end of his long combo because it's possible to land a charged heavy in both of these situations. I also like running around when he does the double bite followed by the fire spray. The tantrum attack now really scares me as getting caught by this fire is instant death. Surprisingly, I did survive one claw swipe, which was the only one I took the whole fight. After a few more hits to the head, I landed the crit and luckily managed to land the last few finishing blows as he recovered, ending the mid-irritation of this boss fight. For now, anyway. We actually hadn't leveled up in a while, so I went up to 45 dex and cracked out the Hollow Slayer Greatsword for our next bout. This weapon does extra damage against hollow enemies. This includes our boy Gael, but only in phases 2 and 3. For a greatsword, the swing is quite fast, which I like. I did try out the weapon art, which is a stance that can do one of two different attacks, but I felt like it locked me in place too long for it to be worth it, given one slash from him takes me out thanks to the cloak after sweep. For the first phase, I snuck in a few charged heavies where I could, but can I just say how much I dislike the upward swing of most greatswords? It so often misses and seems to limit their range. For the following phases, I found the uncharged heavy was better, as this was like my beloved poke. Despite this supposedly doing 20% more damage, it didn't really feel like that much, to be honest. Seems these promises of extra damage were quite hollow, but it was a fairly safe strat and poking him repeatedly brought me some kind of weird satisfaction. No idea what that's about. Towards the end, I went for a follow-up to the heavy, but it didn't finish him. Why does this keep happening here? A running R1 ended it, and now it's just one more boss before we can upscale to the New Game Plus cycle. You know what time it is? Sellsword Windblades, and they're going all the way to +10. Hell, I even cracked out the gold pine resin for even more win. Can I not go through one boss without choking at the last minute? I was the one selling here. So confession time, I have never used these before, but I see why people like them. The speed of the swing is very satisfying, and the damage for such a fast weapon is really solid. Often, when I get a stagger in this fight, I can't capitalize all that well, but here, I can absolutely demolish his health upon a single stagger. The final third of his health in the first phase gone in an instant. Phase 2 similarly is not much issue. I probably didn't even need the gold pine resin, but it looks cool. We dodge and weave with our beautiful dance of blades, and finally we render this boss as Cinder. One more lighting myself on fire sesh, and we're okay, not quite onto the final cycle yet. I grab Soul of Cinder's sword as well as the frayed blade with Midir's soul. I still have a couple of other things I want to get. Back in Dark Firelink Shrine, I farmed the Black Knight Greatsword with relative ease before taking a very long time to get the Black Knight Great Axe. This guy just would not drop it for love nor money. Seriously, he dropped every other possible item he could, but not the Great Axe. Finally, after about an hour, he decided to stop being a dick and dropped it for me. I then upgraded a load of my weapons to no higher than +6, just like last time, and I rose from my grave one final time to begin the luck cycle for this melee extravaganza. We can now at last use the bandit knife that we were denied last time, and who better than Gundyr? Honestly, maybe I shouldn't have unbanned it because wow did this demolish Gundyr. The fast bleed was insane, he could barely do anything as we sliced away at him. I mean, he is the first boss, but still, we're off to a good start and we don't even have any luck yet. And judging by the level up cost, we might not have any for a while. Just to mention again, I know using loads of hollow infusions would probably be the sensible way to go about this, but we don't do sensible here. I promise you we will get one weapon that scales with luck though. But first time to dig out some of those weapons we were prevented from using last cycle, like the Profaned Greatsword. I mean, some fire damage there against Vort should be good, right? Using the weapon art to buff the sword with fire and then working in those charge poke heavies right into Vort, smooth as butter. The fight ends pretty quick. Although I did let out some profanities when I realized I should have saved this for Half-Light. Oops. Well, that's a problem for future JK to worry about. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to do something I haven't done for ages. I'm actually going to speak to Yoel. I normally don't take advantage of his free levels because I hate the hollowing effect on my character, but here I need him. After making my way into the settlement, I then meet up with Yoel and get some levels in luck. I want to get as many as I can, so you know what that means. Yep, chucking myself off into oblivion a bunch of times. After enough of this, we can return to Yoel and get up to a phenomenal 15 luck. Not that this is going to help us in any way, yet, or even at all maybe, I don't know. But while we ponder that, we might as well take out the Greatwood with the Murakumo, one of the only curved greatswords in the game. Not sure why, but the ads in the boss fight were especially annoying this time. Shame I can't activate ad block for this. Using this big sword here was probably overkill. Just look at that 3-hit spinning slash there to those back balls. Beautiful. This didn't take long, plus he doesn't deserve any more of my commentary than that. We can finally level up luck for real this time. Yay, 16 luck! Past the Road of Sacrifices, we speak to Amri, and for the first time in several years, I'm actually going to do her questline as it has the perfect reward for this cycle. Now though, armed with the spike mace we farmed ages ago, it's time once again for the horrendous and painful boss fight with the Crystal Sage. Was it bad? Yeah, it sucked, just like usual. At least for the first attempt. For the next attempt, things went surprisingly smooth actually. I decided to try and get as much damage as I could before phase 2. Using the Warcry weapon art, I was able to use the heavy attack to land multiple hits and actually land a bleed right before the Sage disappeared for the phase transition. This time, I just rushed the Sage, somehow didn't get hit, and mowed down its health quickly enough to put an end to this final horrible encounter. The difficulty hadn't spiked as much as I was expecting here. After upgrading luck, I slap on the Priestess ring for some faith points, allowing me to wield the Earthshaker axe for the Deakheads. Although the damage from the axe is decent, I really just wanted to use this for the weapon art, making them bounce up and down. This looks hilarious, but sadly the damage wasn't really enough to justify leaving myself open for attacks, and I realized I'd probably need a different weapon. So I decided to try Dancer's enchanted swords instead, putting on some heavier armor to give myself more poise to hopefully allow me to spin right through them. The L1 combo is excellent and mows down multiple Deacons at once. It's always ideal if you can clear a lot of Deacons before the main one spawns. I was a little nervous as I was still taking lots of hits throughout and only had 6 flasks by the time the Archdragon spawned. But thankfully, my enchanting dance moves were easily enough to get me through this predicament and clear the way to victory. First try using these babies. After engaging in some Chromers with these birds in Firelink, we get some more Twinkling Titanite and use it to upgrade the Irithyll Straightsword to +3 for later. We then find our pilgrim friend who has passed on. YOLO, I guess. Anyway, Uriel is here to take his place, who thankfully sells purging stones so we can stave off this horrible shriveled ballsack look for a while. God, I hate that. We then return to Faren Keep, put out the fires, and go to face the Abyss Watchers with the Earthshaker axe. Not gonna lie, it was kinda tough going back to mid-rolling against them, but the strategy largely remains the same. I did manage to Earthshaker the 2 ads partway through the first phase though. For the second phase, we again bait the jump, but I did use Earthshaker after the backstab one time to turn this guy into an Abyss Watcher. With just a few more hits, we shake down the first Lord of Cinder on this final cycle. I felt at this point our lack of luck was really hindering our progress, so I used some poppables to get up to 20 luck and speak to Anri, who stopped by Firelink Shrine. She said she's going to head to Irithyll, which is convenient because I'm also going that way. We meet up with her again in the Catacombs, where she's been separated from her companion Horace. I think he might have got lost in the woods before this. Sometimes you can't see the Horace for the trees. We actually meet her again shortly after. She asked me again if I've seen him, and yeah, nothing's changed in the last 5 minutes, dude. So, for Wolnir, I thought why not kill him with his own holy sword. This actually proved slightly harder than anticipated. I mean, sure, we used the AoE weapon art to destroy one of the bands early, so that was cool. But for whatever reason, the last wristband just would not go despite lots of hits. Okay, maybe they were Wolnir misses, it was hard to tell honestly. But after enough patience and a bit of luck, the High Lord is defeated and we can now— hey, what the hell, why is he still alive? After smashing that luck stat, we head into Irithyll, smash the dog, smash the knight, and then smash one more bit of dialogue with Anri. Are you still going on about Horace? Well, the only solution is for me to get you forcibly kidnapped, kill you, and then marry you. Wait, what? After throwing some bones into this hole to lure these dogs in, I upgrade the Exile Greatsword up to +9. It's the strongest weapon I've got at the moment, so I'm using it for Pontiff. My plan once again is parrying with the Hornet Ring and using this leather shield this time because we can't barehand parry thanks to weapon arts in this game. I buff further using charcoal pine resin and land the opening parry, taking off about a third of his health. A follow-up with a heavy charge instantly after starts his transition to phase 2. I land another charged heavy after he grows wings and another as he summons the clone. I then somehow land a parry and crit, which, followed up with a charged heavy, puts an end to this fight. We finish this one in X style. Onwards to Anor Londo. This is important because we can now finish Amri's questline. We speak to our mammy in Firelink Shrine, Urea Ripley, who tells us to go and find Amri in the Dark Moon Chamber. This pilgrim tells us to go ahead and penetrate our bride with our sword. I don't really feel good about doing this, but I'm too weak and give in to the peer pressure. This is definitely the strangest marriage ceremony I've ever seen. But good news, we now get the Dark Sigils, I guess? The main reason I did this is because quitting out lets us get Amri's straight sword, a weapon that actually scales with luck. I know there's another way to go about this without killing Anri, but I never get this ending, so I felt I might as well do it here. We now grab the Wolf Knight's greatsword for later using the Abyss Watcher's soul, and now it's time for the Man of Devour, Aldrich. We're using the Astora straight sword as supposedly he can be frosted. When you don't get killed in this alcove, that is. As usual, it didn't really help all that much. I only procced Frost once the whole fight near the end, so yeah, not great. I got less lucky with the arrow spam this time. He decided to use it quite a lot in phase 2, and at one point there was a pretty stinky hitbox from this swipe attack. But after a few more minutes, I let out my stored up anger on this blob idiot, and another Lord of Cinder bites the dust. I just keep getting luckier. See, even Dark Souls 2 is doing the lucky dance for me. Will I ever get tired of luring animals into death pits? No, I won't. While I take a quick nap, we can now get to the part of the video that I know you've all been waiting for. Once again, I gave the controller to my wife Babs. She's going to demonstrate her incredible gaming skill, this time by killing a New Game++ boss with an unupgraded broken straight sword. I hope you're ready for this. Well, that was pretty incredible. Make sure to write in the comments that Babs is the greatest Dark Souls 3 player of all time. Anyway, thanks to Babs' efforts, we can now buy all the types of Titanite we need again. With some scales bought, we get the frayed blade up to +4. This is Half-Light's weapon, and I've never actually used it before. Given that the Nameless King is weak to dark, and how much damage this weapon art normally does to me when Half-Light uses it, I had pretty high hopes. But sadly, those numbers did nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. Why is that so weak? I mean, I know it's New Game++, but 2 R1s does way more than either attack from the weapon art and doesn't use FP. There's got to be a middle ground between the overpowered weapon arts of Elden Ring and this. Anyway, rant over. On the positive for this weapon, the R1 is quite fast, meaning that in some openings we can get multiple hits or a charged heavy in. 3 R1s is definitely the best damage-wise. Nameless King can actually be bled, but he has such a high resistance that it's pretty hard to actually proc it. I know this fight pretty well now, so I wasn't afraid of dying, and after only taking one hit the whole fight, Nameless King is done for. Luck is really looking good now. So, one Lord of Cinder remains. What do you think I'm gonna use? That's right, it's time to kill Storm the Giant using the Yorm Ruler. Okay, so I could have done another round of the hand-hitting strat, but I figured it's probably the only run where I'll get to use the actual intended gimmick weapon, so I might as well give it a chance to shine. Even in New Game++, it absolutely decimates his health, and it only takes a few blasts to make this giant conform to our will. Now here's a surprise. I actually didn't kill Dancer early for once, so being warped to this room does activate the boss fight this time. Although I was still bouncing with excitement from the previous encounter, I knew that basing my next decision off this was a bad call, so I headed back to check my weapon stock. After some deliberation, I opted for the Drakeblood Greatsword. This weapon is unique in that it deals physical, magic, and lightning damage all at the same time. Will this be a good choice for Dancer? Or was this a mistake? Let's find out. So one thing I'll say for this run is that, even though there's been deaths aplenty, it has really helped me learn a lot of these bosses' movesets. I actually blasted through Dancer's first phase, landing a lot of charged heavies without taking any hits, which was surprising. Sadly, this didn't continue in phase 2 thanks to some furniture obscuring my view. Lucky I didn't die there, to be honest. The next bit was kinda messy. I was really surprised I didn't choke given how many hits I ended up taking. Lloyd's shield ring really putting in the work. Towards the end, I just thought, screw it, and went for 2 charged heavies, which somehow I did not get punished for, and this fight is thankfully over. Drake blood, sweat and tears went into that one, I tell ya. So let's do some cleanup now. For the old Demon King, I used the Despicable Me Curve Sword this time. Basically just a longer, higher damage version of the dagger we used last time. I really wasn't sure about these weapons, but I kinda grew to like them over the course of this run. With the damage and the poison, this lasts only about 90 seconds. I know I could have used one of the Black Knight weapons as it does more damage to demons, but it honestly would have felt like a waste on this guy. Anyway, he is defeated. With his souls, we buy up a bunch more Titanite scales and upgrade his hammer, the ultimate insult. I was initially going to use the hammer to smash up this Irithyll Knight, but then I realized luring him to be burnt to death by the dragon was much funnier. Oh hey, he actually drops a weapon. I don't know if I've ever killed him before. Anyway, I wanted to use the Old King's hammer for Dragon Slayer armor. With the armor weak to strike attacks and fire, this seemed like the best choice. Damage was really solid, and I've learned my lesson about wearing armor myself when I'm forced to mid-roll anyway. This run has really hammered that home to me. He did also play really nice for me by doing the falling bolt attack a few times, but guess what? He survived with a tiny slither of health. This is like the 4th time this has happened in this run. I was going to try finish him with the weapon art lava slam, but I chickened out at the last minute and hit him normally. I didn't fancy old choking somehow after all that. Well, what say we test out the Irithyll rapier we got from that night? With some twinkling tights, we upgrade to +4 and decide to go skewer some cuttlefish. He is apparently also weak to frost as well, but given that Aldrich was also apparently weak to frost, Hey, we procced it already! Sweet! This weapon actually worked great. Until I tried to use the weapon art near the end. Probably good for PvP or something, but terrible for Osiris given how much it missed. But 4 hits proccing frost was very useful and helped to fill this dragon full of holes and help us to pick up the W shortly after. Oh, Champion Gundyr? Well, I figured out the most insulting weapon to use against him. That's right, the Fire Link Greatsword. Legend of Zelda is his favourite franchise, you see, so he'd be really upset if Link got let go. So, guess what? The weapon art was actually good. It did good damage, has nice range, and also buffs the sword with fire for a bit, letting us get more damage in. That's what I'm talking about. Landed up close, and you get even more damage. There were still some close calls here. It's easy to get smashed if you take your eye off the ball with him even for a moment. This final sequence of dodging and attacking was something I'm pretty proud of though. A champion performance, one might say. Remember how the claws did great against the princes before? Well, we've also got the mannequin claws, so I'm going to test them out. I gotta say, the L1 combo did a great job of absolutely dismantling the Crystal Sage in the archives, managing to take them out before they disappeared. Hopefully that sends a message to all the other enemies in here. On the way up to the top, I had a bit of a weird interaction here. First time I climbed up, I gargled and fell to my death, but next time it was in fact the gargoyle who gargled and fell off. Weirdly, there was no death sound and I didn't get any souls, they just kinda disappeared. Huh. You know what? Things have gone pretty smoothly for a while here. I've managed to finally kick my habit of choking at the last... Well, that's manic armor, I guess. Well, that aside, this actually went even better than last time. If you take one thing away from this video, give claws a try in Dark Souls 3. So much time after the attack to dodge. In Phase 2, I actually got more attacks in on Lothric this time. So much so, in fact, that after I killed Lorien for only the first time in Phase 2, I unleashed an all-out assault on Lothric, and thanks to a bleed proc right near the end, I killed him before he was able to revive his mannequin, and thus the final Lord of Cinder for this cycle is defeated. The Art of Claw prevails once again. Now, because we have Lorien's Greatsword and Lothric's Holy Sword, we can trade them in for the Twin Prince Greatsword, which I've no doubt will be an absolutely epic weapon. But now is not the time for that. It's time for the DLC, and also time to bust out the Executioner's Greatsword. This sword is quite unique because it actually does strike damage, the only greatsword that does that, I believe. We once again head down to the depths of the painting. Obviously, I got down first try, and there were no deaths that I didn't record footage of. Hopefully, our flat sword will work well against the champion's Gravetender. The wolves definitely went down a bit easier this time. The Gravetender himself was not going as smooth thanks to that stance attack he kept doing. Pretty BS that he just poises through my charge. But then I got lucky and broke his guard, letting me land a critical followed by me mashing R1 furiously and it somehow killing him. I didn't say it would be executed skillfully, just that it would get done. From the torch video, someone told me that apparently if you hit the wolf with a charged heavy while it's spewing frost, it always staggers, and it appears that is accurate. The critical was enough to leave them both in the tender embrace of death. You know what we need right now? Luck. Much more luck. That's right, it's finally time for Amri's Straightsword, which I believe has an A scaling in luck from what the wikis say. It's probably false, but hey. It also has a unique property that means we regain health at around 2 HP per second. Not enormous, but hey, it's something. After watching Master Wilhelm become Master Wilfelm once again, we get up to the chapel and prepare for the final assault on Frida. I actually opted to upgrade the Straightsword to max here, as I realised I had enough slabs to do that with every weapon for the last few bosses. You know, for a Straightsword, the damage is pretty good. I mean, getting that damage requires levelling up luck load, so it's probably not a great trade-off, but anyway. By this point, I had gotten really good at reading Sister Frida's movements. In Phase 1, I realised I could also backstab her after the leaping frost jump if I got my positioning right. In Phase 2, I also got the backstab just as she was doing the healing animation, basically Frida damage there. For Black Flame Frida, she has the same frost jump, which again you can backstab if you get your positioning right. Kinda crazy that I once used to consider this the hardest boss fight in the Souls trilogy, but now I can get through it on New Game Plus with unupgraded health and only using 4 Estus. I've come and really far since then, and honestly, I'm kinda proud of myself. Alrighty, so, I upgrade all of my remaining weapons to maximum with all the slabs I've got, before securing myself another point of luck and heading into the Dreg Heap, Black Knight Great Axe in tow. It's been a while since we did Big Unga Bunga. Ooh, we one-shot the Angel. So, I alluded to this earlier, but there's a specific reason I'm using this weapon for this next bit. So, the Twin Demons and the Demon Prince both take an extra 20% damage from Black Knight weapons. The damage really is no joke. Over 800 damage to the demons with a single R1 and nearly 400 to the prince. But there's one problem. Stamina. 2 R1s totally drains my stamina bar. Even just using one attack locks me in place, so I need to really ensure I'm in a position to dodge because one-shots are really on the table here. Given that it's once again a guaranteed mid-roll sesh, I decided to give myself some slightly better armor before descending for the battle once again. One big problem with this weapon and others of this size that I don't think I've mentioned thus far is the rolling attack. It does this very weird short-range attack where you jam the weapon into the ground, which basically always misses unless you're literally touching the boss. I would have probably done this way quicker had this been a nice horizontal swing. I mean, the first phase isn't too bad. We break the demon's poise with just a few hits, and then the critical attack takes off half their health. Demon Prince is the real worry. I can't afford to be vulnerable at any point or this fight will end quickly. I learned that staying on the right side of him is slightly safer as you can avoid the knuckle drag attack. I'd hoped that a poise break and a critical would do a bit more damage, but it's still nice. I basically ended up doing this phase hitless because if I hadn't, I'd probably be dead. With one final critical attack, we let the demon reunite with his brethren in the blackness of death. We're inching ever closer to the end. With that huge chunk of souls in hand, we can allocate some more points into our chosen stat. These creatures impart us with their knowledge as we descend before we make one final mad dash down the Ring City streets. Now here, it's time for the Wolf Knight's Greatsword to shine. You see, it does 20% additional damage to Abyss-type monsters, and our boy Midir does indeed fall into that category. It's kinda hard to get a good idea of how decent the damage is from this chaotic bridge encounter, but the real fight will be a much better test. But there's one thing we simply must do before this. There we go. Derptorius is ready to go. So let's check the damage. Almost 600 from a single R1 swing, which is pretty good. A running R2 clears 700, and a charged R2 hits for around 1100, which is really good. But of course, we also have a weapon art allowing us to execute the Artorius Somersault for another clean 1100 plus damage. Given that it was faster and had more damage than the charged heavy, this was comfortably one of my favourite weapon arts of the whole run. The finish to this fight was pretty wild. Midir executed the multi-smack combo, which I punished with a somersault, but then I realised I was up against a wall. Before I could get myself to a better position, he started the double bite followed by the fire breath, which I managed to dodge, get round to the side of his head, and land a running R1, opening him up for the critical. As he recovered, it took just 2 further R1s to the head to end the fight completely. I didn't even intend it to be, but this fight was actually completed hitless as well. Needless to say, the Wolf Knight Greatsword had me howling with joy. But of course, one thing that was devoid of joy was Half-Light, which unfortunately was next in this final gauntlet. Right, let's do this. What? You didn't think I grabbed that staff earlier for no reason, did you? Fuck Half-Light. End of story. 2 bosses remain. With 44 luck now on our side, I transported myself to the empty wasteland at the end of time and prepared for what would end up being quite a tricky fight. For this one, I was going to use the Twin Prince's Greatsword. With its 2 very cool weapon arts, this should be an epic encounter for sure. Well, actually no. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of comments disagreeing and saying it's good for PvP or whatever, but I was pretty underwhelmed by this weapon. It does get some scaling with Int and Faith, so perhaps if I'd leveled those up it would be better, but not great damage all around with my current build. The best part was the Fire Sword weapon art, but you have to be really close and it has quite a wind up, so it didn't seem worth it. Oh, also I really struggled with Phase 2 this time round for some reason. 1 scuff dodge again means death because his attacks hit twice. In principle, this should be easy as I've done him so many times before, but the low damage made this fight really drag out. The winning attempt took 17 minutes total. I was probably being overly cautious, to be honest with you. This run took me 3 weeks to do, and at this point I was ready for it to be done. I actually found Phase 2 harder than Phase 3 because Phase 3 I found has much clearer windows where I know he won't be able to respond with a follow-up. With enough patience as well as constant fear of choking again, I finally landed the last couple of strikes to execute my twin condition. Well, just 1 weapon left to use, but first, 1 final dose of luck. We place all the cinders of the lords for the last time and pray at the fire for the run's completion. So the Black Knight Greatsword is our last weapon. I felt like it was kind of fitting to smack Gwyn's soul with a sword wielded by his own knights. Honestly, seeing this damage on Soul of Cinder following the Gael fight nearly brought a tear to my eye. He also kindly decided to stay in sorcerer form until he was 1 hit from death before not so kindly switching to spear form and smacking me up loads. I got those hits eventually and we moved to the Soul of Gundyr phase. I baited the jump attack as that was the main window I felt comfortable to get an attack in on. It didn't take too many hits, but I did actually nearly die at the end as he fired off his lightning as I delivered the final blow. I thought I was safe, but it struck me right after and came within a millimeter of killing me. Thankfully, we survive, and at last, we can wish good night to this run. This was an absolute marathon, one of the longest and toughest runs I think I've ever completed. I think the most I've died on one of these multi-cycle challenges as well. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching up to this point. I'm gonna go rest now. Until next time, I've been JK Leeds. See ya, and have a good one.